Thank you. Our speaker today is a social worker, mediator, consultant, relationship coach, communication expert, therapist, and the author of Easiest Keys to a Relatively Easy Relationship. She is also our interim director. Please welcome Amy Miller.
We're trying something new today. I'm not going to stand here and read a long thing that I wrote. We're going to see if I can operate this successfully. Wait for it. While we're waiting for it, I will say that song is by Maren Morris, and when I was supposed to do this talk originally was in March, and I did not have a Claire, so there was not going to be this song. Claire actually, when I mentioned that I was going to do this talk, she said that she knew the song, so we were able to put it together, but if you don't know the song, please check it out. Jake, is there something I can do up here? Yeah? Hey, we did it. Although those are not the colors that I see on my screen, but okay, close. It's close, it's all good. And then is this gonna work? Yep, okay. So this is the chorus of the song that we just did. And the reason that I think about this for healthy relationships is that when your foundation is solid on your relationship, so many things can happen, so many things can go wrong, and you can figure it out from there. So another way to think about that is if your relationship is like a bank account, and if you're constantly making deposits into your relationship bank account, then anything that happens along the way is just like a minor withdrawal that you don't even notice, and you never end up overdrafting your account. But if you don't continue to invest in your relationship, which I see a lot of people not remembering to do, then when you have a minor incident, then it feels devastating because you don't have a surplus. So keep that in mind. So I've been a relationship therapist for a decade. When I first started, this is from my original website, because when people come to relationship coaching, or at the time relationship therapy, they waited too long. They waited until they were in crisis, and they waited until everything had gone awry, and they couldn't find any movement forward. And so I always remember, I'm like, I can't magically undo everything that you've done to harm your relationship. So if you are ever thinking about going to get help for your relationship, whether it's a new relationship or one you've been in for 40, 50 years, I know many of you have been together for decades. Many people in our community have very long relationships. You have to go before it's a mess, right? Because no one is a magician, because magic's not real, remember? So, here's some of my ideas about relationships, and you can take or leave them. You may disagree with me. This is born of 10 years of experience and a lot of experience in relationships in all different iterations, and many of them not going very well, and learning as I go. The guiding principle first that I want you to remember is that relationships are a skill. And as with any skill, you'd start out not knowing how to do something. So you saw Claire play the guitar. Claire wasn't born playing the guitar. She had to learn how to play the guitar. You had to learn how to drive a car, right? You didn't just get in a car and you were able to drive. We expect human beings to be able to drive the car in a relationship without teaching them how to do it. So relationships are a skill that we can develop, and if you have not developed the skills, even if you're 80 years old, it is fine. It is not too late to develop those skills. This is one of my guiding principles, and I think sometimes people get to a certain point in life and they feel like, well, I just am who I am. This just is what it is. And I fundamentally and wholeheartedly disagree with that. So another guiding principle that I work with is that relationships are not easy, but the reason my book was called Easy-ish was because if you set it up right, if the relationship is healthy, then it'll be hallmarked by relative ease. And by relative ease, I mean it is relatively easy for you and this person, which doesn't necessarily mean someone else would find it easy. And by easy, I mean, Lionel Richie's my favorite, by the way. Easy like Sunday morning, easy like I can easily understand what you're trying to say to me, easy like it is easy for me to remember why I love you, easy like you easily make me feel seen and valued in a way that I can easily reciprocate. That's not the same as we don't ever fight, which we'll get to that later. It's not the same thing. It doesn't mean everything's perfect. It doesn't mean we understand each other all the time. It means it's relatively easy, causing or involving little difficulty or discomfort. So the third guiding principle, so any people you can make a relationship work, right? So people will come to get help and they'll say, well, maybe we're just incompatible. I don't really think that's a thing. I don't think your personality type or your astrological sign or your whatever issues you have, your diagnoses, nothing external makes you compatible. But there are so you can make it work, but there are situations in which it's never gonna be easy. And so that's the choice to make. It's like you can love somebody all day long, and it's never easy. And at that point, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not compatible in some fundamental way. It just means it's probably not gonna get easier, and you have to sort of accept that or decide that what you're looking for is something easier. There's such a thing as fundamental incompatibility of temperament and of life experience. And that is the thing that bumps up against each other that will make it hard. So the other thing to remember is that even if you've been in a relationship for a very, very long time, it is never too late to renegotiate the terms of the agreements you've made. So whether those agreements are wedding vows or whether they are unspoken agreements that sort of guide the way that you interact with each other, at the end of the day, a healthy relationship requires the openness to renegotiation, to say, this isn't working for me anymore. It was working before, or it wasn't working before, but I didn't say anything, but I'm interested in changing something. Because relationships are dynamic and fluid, just like people, and they grow, change, and evolve just like people. So what happens a lot of times in a long-term relationship is people, they fail to evolve together, and they sometimes fail to inform each other about the changes that they're making, so that you arrive 5 years later and you're like, who is this person? Like, you weren't like this when we got together. Well, I was changing, but I didn't tell you. Or I was changing and you didn't notice. So part of a healthy relational dynamic is informing each other of the ways in which you're changing and you're growing yourself, whether that's because you're doing therapy or because you're caring about yourself differently, or because you've adopted a spiritual practice of some kind. Whatever the thing is that is making you change, you have a responsibility to inform your partner so that they can stay on the path with you. However, it's not a failure if you can't grow and change together and you need to stop trying. So some of you were probably here, like Crystal White, I know you were here when I gave my very first talk here in 2018 about relationships, and I think I said something like, I'm a huge fan of divorce, which is true. I am a huge fan of divorce in the same way I'm a huge fan of abortion, and I'm a huge fan of anything that offers people a right to change something or to choose their circumstances. And so I think it's really important to always remember that you did not fail if your relationship didn't work, if you decided that what you were looking for was something a little easier or something a little bit sweeter or something a little bit something different. You didn't fail if you got divorced. You didn't fail if you broke up. You probably did each other a service most of the time. So then people are like, well, okay, fine, but like, how do you do that? How do you build an easy-ish relationship? But the most important part is like knowing yourself when you enter into the relationship. And if you don't know yourself when you enter into the relationship because you were much younger, then learning who you are now, today, so that you can reintroduce yourself to this person who's been with you a long time, but maybe hasn't been kept abreast of your progress or your changes. Knowing who you are fundamentally and what you want from a relationship and from your life. Knowing what your values are, But more importantly, how important it is to you that your values align. So for those of you who are not partnered, that is the thing to remember, is like, you don't have to have the same values if it is not that important to you that your values align. But for many of us I know here, our values are inextricable from who we are as people. So my guess is for most of the people here, it is very important that your values align with your partner's values. What you believe in, and I don't mean that in a do you believe in God way, I mean like what you believe in, like what you will stand on. What is the most important things to you? What are your non-negotiables? What kind of relationship do you prefer? There's all kinds of ways, and we'll get to that too, but there's all kinds of ways to do relationships, and none of them are wrong. So you coming into a new relationship, you have to get clear on what is the relationship that you want, so that you can inform the person early on, the kind of relationship that I want is this. Are you available for that? So if you're already in a relationship, it's not too late to have that conversation to say, we're not really doing it the way I would do it if it were really up to me to start over, but I don't want to end things. I just want to reintroduce you to myself and tell you what kind of relationship I'm looking for and see if you're available for it. That includes, what are your deal breakers? Everybody has deal breakers. And most of the time, deal breakers actually are more flexible than we think. The example that I often use is, I would have said it was really important to me that someone be conscientious about time. Like, that's a value of mine. I try not to be late for things. I'm pretty annoyed when other people are late for things. I married a person who's late for things. And I would have said before I knew that person that was really important and possibly a deal breaker. But as I get to know this person, the thing about him that makes him inclined to be late for things is also the thing about him that makes him patient and that makes him not have that like anxious urgency that so many of us suffer from. So I can't trade out this thing that's annoying over here to be able to keep this good thing over here, because they're the same thing. They're just two sides of the same coin. So I would have said it was a deal breaker abstractly, and with this actual human being, which, by the way, I'm sure he's watching, with this actual human being, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'd just work around it. I lie to him about what time doctor's appointments are. Like, oh yeah, we need to leave at, we were early to a wedding, guys, because I said we needed to leave at 3:30. We really didn't need to leave till 4, but then we left at 3:52, and it was perfect. So that's the kind of thing you have to adjust to, and you have to accept that 0 people are perfect, and no one is ever going to be able to do everything the way you want them to do it, and figure out so often, here's a pro tip. So when you think about a thing that annoys you about anyone, whether that's your partner or a long-term friend or a family member, think about the thing that annoys you, and then what's the good side of the same thing? Like, what's the thing? So a lack of urgency is annoying, right? But patience is not annoying. So they're the same thing. So sometimes it can help you to stay in compassion with someone and understanding, to see that, like, this annoying thing is actually the shadow side of this good thing that I really like. And then you can maybe be less irritated. So also knowing what's your preferred communication style. This is really important for all relationships. This is not just for intimate relationships. I have to actively say to human beings, I am very direct. I am not trying to hurt your feelings. If I hurt your feelings, I need you to tell me. Because my preferred communication style is not to tiptoe around things, but to communicate clearly and directly. Some people don't like that, or they're not used to it. If I inform them, then when I do it, they're like, oh, I knew she was going to do it this way, so therefore I'm less activated by it. So whatever your communication style is, if you inform people of what they can expect from you, then they're less frustrated, upset, hurt, whatever, when they receive that thing from you, if it feels bad to them. So knowing whatever your preferred communication style is and sharing that with people is very useful. Personality type, love language, these are a little softer, maybe not useful for all of you. The Love Languages book is actually helpful, but it's faith-based, it's Christian. I don't recommend reading the book, but I do recommend keeping in mind that some people receive and give love in different ways. So that's the takeaway from that, is that there are ways that someone could, if you are someone who doesn't need verbal affirmation, then and you need something else from me, so say Samantha and I are in a relationship, I'm gonna tell her every day how much I love her and appreciate her, every day. She might be like, yeah, I don't need you to do that. I need you to take the trash out. I'd be like, but I'm loving you. She'd be like, well, you're not loving me the way that I want to be loved, which is I want you to take the trash out, and that will make me feel loved. So it's that sort of thing of figuring out what other people need to feel the way they want to feel, not just giving it to them how you want to. I almost said, does anybody have any questions? Don't ask questions right now. Number 2, understand relationships. So I already told you, like, nobody knows what they're doing, and I feel like that's, like, a great place to start. Like, nobody knows what they're doing. Whether they're 20 or they're 75 and they've been married for 50 years, it doesn't matter. People don't really know what they're doing. So you always have to remember there is no such thing as a normal relationship. So if you look around and you're like, well, this person has a great relationship and this person has a terrible relationship, you actually don't know if that's terrible and that's great for them, because there's no such thing as a normal relationship. So every relationship has its own culture. Just like this place has a culture, right? And we're working on making some minor changes to the culture to make it feel different to more and better to more people. Your relationship, every one-on-one relationship that you have, whether it's with your friends here, whether it's with your family or your intimate partner, every relationship has its own culture. Every relationship has its own set of rules, expectations, norms, things that you do and don't do with and for each other. So I always say this, and sometimes this is like mind-blowing to people. If whatever you're doing or not doing in the context of your relationship, if you're both happy, if you both self-report being happy, it's normal, it's fine. So if there's weird stuff that you're doing, it's fine, it doesn't matter. There's all kinds of different contexts that people can have their relationships in, that maybe they even feel like it's normal for them, for us at home, but we don't want to tell people about it because people will think it's weird. None of it's weird. Every iteration is totally normal and human and possible. And I think sometimes having a more expansive idea about what a relationship can be like is the thing that can set you free in the relationship you're in or future relationships. Because there's no rules at all. Like, there's so many conventions, and luckily, the people in this room, by and large, have probably worked through rejecting a lot of the conventions of our culture at large. And yet, you're still indoctrinated with a lot of ideas about what relationships are supposed to look like. And I just would love for you to divest yourself from them, because you can make whatever rules you want to make. So I think of a serious relationship as like a DIY project that you are both working on. You're both equally responsible for it if it falls apart. But you're also both equally responsible for figuring out how to rebuild it, and hopefully to build it in a way that works for both of you. And again, that can be also extrapolated to any relationship that is not romantic, because I know there's some people here who are not interested in romantic relationships. And I want to include, because you still have meaningful relationships in your life. Any relationship that you are invested in, you can do it however you want. So some of you came to the forum about using words, but this is like always a foundational principle for me, is that people are not mind readers. So any relationship you're in, anytime you find yourself saying, if you're complaining to your friend or you're complaining about something, you say, well, they should just know. They don't, I promise. So whatever you think someone should just know, they probably don't if you haven't told them. So the other thing to keep in mind is that the golden rule is not always the best practice. So sometimes this relates to the love languages, it relates to all kinds of factors, but when you think about treating people the way you want to be treated is sometimes not as helpful as asking them how they want to be treated and responding that way. So another thing to remember is you can't make anyone else happy. So a lot of times I think we go into relationships expecting to find like our other half or our better half, or someone who's going to complete us, someone who's going to make us happy, but that's not a thing. The goal of a healthy relationship is to facilitate one another's happiness. What is it that you need to be happy? What is it that I need to be happy? And how can we work together to facilitate each of us feeling how we want to feel in this relationship, even if they're not the same things, and even if they are actually uncomfortable for us? It's okay. You can be uncomfortable in order to meet your partner's needs as long as it's not hurting you. because discomfort is not pain. So the other thing to keep in mind about communicating is using assertive language about you and not about your partner. So I feel, this is basic communication, I feel this way. When this happens, I feel this way. When this behavior shows up in our relationship, this is the outcome, which is very different than saying you are this way, or name calling, ascribing intention without curiosity. Anytime you find yourself saying you are whatever, you're in the wrong, and that conversation is not gonna go well, and you're not gonna reach an outcome that is satisfying to both of you. So removing the accusatory name-calling language from your vocabulary will benefit all of your relationships in that way. Don't have meaningful conversations via text. Super basic, often ignored. This includes email, but essentially, if you're having a miscommunication, most often your best bet is to say, hey, we're missing each other. This isn't going well. Can we sit down and talk when we're both in a better place to talk? So if you're emotionally triggered and you're shooting off text messages and you wrote a paragraph this long and then they wrote a paragraph this long and then you're responding to something 3 paragraphs ago, it's not a conversation and it's not going to resolve. That goes for all your relationships as well. So conflict is not bad. We also talked about this in forum, which some of you were there. Conflict is not bad. Conflict is a natural state that is born of disagreements, which, again, all the people in this room have strong personalities. You're going to have conflict. You're going to disagree. You're going to want to do something one way, and somebody else is going to want to do it another way. It is okay. It is not inherently negative to have conflict. What is inherently negative is being harmful in the conflict. The way to avoid conflict is to manage and align expectations. So you can't avoid all conflict. You can minimize conflict by managing and aligning expectations, because very often conflict comes from, I thought it was going to be one way, and you thought it was going to be another way, and neither of us got it how we wanted it, and then we were mad at each other. But what we didn't do often is to say, this is what I want to come out of this. What do you hope to come out of this? What do you hope will happen when we go to this work event? I am going to feel nervous if you leave me alone. Will you please check on me every so often and make sure I'm okay, and don't leave me with your creepy coworker? If I don't say that and we go to the work event and my partner just wanders off because I seem fine and I get cornered by the creepy coworker, I'm pissed at the end of the day. Like, when we leave, I'm mad. Like, how could you do that? Well, my partner might be like, I didn't know you didn't like that person. I didn't know that was uncomfortable for you. You didn't say that, which would be fair. However, if we run into it, if we go into the situation with an expectation, this is what I would like to see happen. What would you like to see happen? Make sure we're on the same page. We avoid the conflict. That didn't happen, by the way. I just made that up. There's no creepy coworkers. If any of Rodney's coworkers are watching, it's not you. Keep the idea in mind that you love this person. So when you're having conflict with someone, even if it's someone that you are not in an intimate partnership with, if you're in a conflict with someone that you just are coworkers with, or someone who is a community member here, if you respect the person, even if you are living your human values, you do not want to hurt anyone. So if you do not want to hurt anyone, then the way you do conflict changes. If you go into conflict with the idea that no one is going to win, we are going to resolve this and find a compromise or a solution that works for both of us, then you go into the conflict with the intention to not cause harm, and the idea that the other person is not trying to harm you. But if you find that you can't go into a conflict situation like that, then saying, I love you too much to have this conversation right now is useful. Or, I respect you too much to have this conversation right now. I'm really triggered. I'm really mad. I'm tired. I'm depleted in some way. I'm unable to do this well. Can we come back to this tomorrow? Many divorces might have been avoided if people would have taken more time before having hard conversations. But nobody knows what they're doing, so it's to be expected. including me. I've had to learn all of this the hard way. So, offering radical grace. So radical grace is a term that I use in the book that I wrote, and I have used it a lot. And recently, it's felt less impactful for me because I think it's important. I've added this asterisk because you have to assume the relationship is relatively healthy before you offer radical grace. So an alternative, and Joan Walker, I'm sorry to keep calling you out on this one, but Joan Walker's family, her brother-in-law, I believe, offered this idea to their family, and they use this in their family, and I would love for many of us to use this as well, is to consider the most charitable interpretation. So if you do not know what happened, to assume neutral or positive intent in the absence of information. What is the most charitable interpretation of this situation? I've been practicing this, Joan. This has been like really impactful for me. Again, sorry to put the spotlight on you, but this has been really helpful for me because that's easier for me to access on a day-to-day basis than radical grace. Radical grace, I can access for my child and my partner, and that's pretty much it. Everybody else, I'm like, I can consider your most charitable interpretation, and I can stay in compassion for you, but I can't just assume that you love me, and this was I totally imagined the slight. But with my family, with my child and my partner, I can stay in radical grace. But thinking through what is the most charitable interpretation of this situation will get you from a place of ascribing intention that is negative to, at the very least, that was weird. I wonder why they did that. I wonder what's going on with that person that made them act in this way that I really did not appreciate. I bet there's something going on. I'm going to investigate, or I'm at least going to stay neutral. And it's hard, but particularly with your children and with your partner, if you're like me, and that's where you can really embody this radical grace notion, it offers me freedom from looking for being hurt, right? Like it offers me freedom from assuming negative intentions. I know 100% my partner would never hurt me on purpose. I know that. I know that in my bones. I know that in my heart. And yet I get hurt sometimes. So as long as I can remember that he would never hurt me on purpose, and so when he does, there's a reason, there's an explanation, there's something going on for him, then we spare ourselves a lot of unnecessary conflict. The bonus number 6, embrace vulnerability. Anybody like vulnerability? One person. Great, Crystal. Crystal likes vulnerability. Most people are like, no, thank you. In fact, I hated vulnerability so much that in a relationship I was in years ago, I wouldn't even say the V word because she would be like, it's okay to be vulnerable, Amy. I'd be like, oh my God, stop saying the V word. Gross. And then Brené Brown came out with her research, and then I got a little older and a little more resilient. And turns out, guys, vulnerability is really, really, really useful for human connection. But we'll save that for another platform. But just keep in mind that when you are willing to be vulnerable, you offer yourself significantly more freedom in the relationship, and you also make it easier for the other person to step closer to you because you're modeling something that maybe they struggle with. So now I'm fine with vulnerability most of the time. Most of the time it's fine. Therapy is terrible. I've been feeling very vulnerable, but it's all in the service of healing and health and connection, all the things that we need and deserve. So this is a tattoo on my leg from a poem by Marge Piercy. And at the end of the day, I think this is really the recipe for relationships. Timing, chemistry, magic, and will, and luck. Like, so many things have to align perfectly. You had to be in the place, you had to meet the person, you had to be open to it, you had to be willing to do the work, you had to stay on the same page. So if you have gotten 20, 30, 40 years into a marriage, and you would say that you would both self-report being happy, you have done something incredible. And it started with this amazing, coincidental place. And this is a wonderful poem, if anyone's interested. So, as we know, it's one of our values here to foster healthy relationships, right? to have, I don't remember the exact verbiage, but something about like, anybody remember? Healthy and productive relationships, to elevate the quality of our relationships, something like that. The relationships are the best part of being human. Like when people are like, how's your job going? I'm like, the people are awesome. That is the best part. Some of the other stuff, I'm like, I have to do a lot of like administrative stuff. Like I can do it. I'm not late most of the time. But the part that I really, really like is the relationships. Like getting to know each of you, which most of you I've had at least an opportunity to speak to at some point. It's been wonderful. And that is the gift that you guys have for each other, is you have 300 something members here, all of whom are amazing and interesting and unique. Especially, I just started collecting the, so quick plug, Fall Gathering is September 10th. And one of the things that we will do is to celebrate milestone anniversaries. We'll just say the people's names, have them stand up if they're in the room, 20, 30, 40, 50-year anniversaries. But I've started reaching out to some people on those 50, 40, 30-year anniversaries and collecting some biographical information. And you people are interesting. Like, I'm like, I want to be like, did you guys know that this person did this cool stuff? Some of you probably did, but others didn't. You guys are a wonderful community of really interesting people. Relationships are the best part of being human. And nobody teaches us how to do this. Nobody teaches us how to do intimate partnerships. Nobody teaches us how to do parenting. Like, everybody's just sort of doing the best that they can. So I'll leave you with the quote from Maya Angelou: do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better. Thank you.